Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by CJ Vogel. Today we're going to talk about pressure. It can bust pipes, it can create diamonds, and it's going to kind of be the theme for Texas for the next 3 weeks, starting with Saturday's game against San Jose State. This edition of On Texas Football is brought to you by our friends at Advanced Pain Care. We'll tell you more about Advanced Pain Care with the help of a couple of lifetime Longhorns here later in the show. CJ, I'll start with this. Starting with the San Jose State game and subsequent games against UTEP and Sam Houston. Is there anybody, any position group, any entity on this team under more pressure the next 3 weeks than Arch Manning, or is the pressure kind of off after his outing against Ohio State?
Yeah, if you're looking for the answer of who has the most pressure, it's not Sarkisian, it's not the red zone, it's not anybody on the defensive side of the ball, because I think they're sitting back chilling just a little bit right now. The answer is unequivocally Arch Manning. And I say that because, look, we could talk about the red zone, and that might pop up tomorrow. It might pop up over the next 3 weeks. But the point is, these games won't be close in the sense that red zone is looked at like it was against Ohio State. And I say this for Arch, and I don't think he's a guy that, has necessarily buckled under a lot of pressure. I think he was rattled, obviously, against Ohio State in the horseshoe. But for Arch, what's the biggest conversation tomorrow going to be? It's going to be, how does he bounce back after a poor performance? How does he look mechanically after not having his fundamentals up to par? I think absolutely it's going to be the performance of Arch Manning on Saturday next week and the Saturday following that we're really looking at saying, okay, can this team ultimately reach the peak that we talked about all offseason long, Jeff? And it starts with Arch Manning. How does he maneuver the offense? How does he command the offense? And ultimately, where does that swagger show up? That's where I'm looking at saying the pressure's on for him to just kind of regain that mojo that we saw at times in 2024.
CJ, you hit the nail on the head. That's really what I want to see from Arch, because I feel like if we see that confident guy, the guy that's got a little swagger, we see the Arch Manning that we saw at times last year that we kind of figured we would see against Ohio State. If we see that guy, I think the performance will follow.
Yep.
Look, he made it clear on Monday in his media availability, he's not concerned with what any of us say, and that should be the case. But also, he seemed really, really businesslike and was just chomping at the bit to get back on the field. So you hope, instead of being kind of a game where he's tight and tries to make everything perfect, hopefully now that performance is done, he can't do anything about the Ohio State game. We see that guy with his confidence, with his swagger back, and in turn, we see a confident Arch Manning dealing and driving the offense down the field.
And that's where football is such a tough game, because you could have a bad game in baseball. You go 0 for 4, you're wearing the golden sombrero, and you're playing the next day. You're out there giving it, more hats. You're ripping at fastballs once again, and who knows, you connect with one that steamrolls into a bit of a run for you at the plate. Well, for Arch Manning, you put up a stinker at the quarterback position, you got to wait 7 days. You get to hear all of us, and I'm sure he's not tuned in watching us, Jeff, but you get to hear the outside noise, and he says he doesn't hear it. But when your name is Arch Manning, when there's so many different mediums in which folks are talking about you and trying to dissect your performance, I'm sure that it's getting back to him at some point. So I think for Arch, 7 days from where he did not have a great day, how can he come back and have that swagger and show that he's ready to take the SEC by storm, as, again, we've talked about all offseason?
All right, CJ, let's play a little either or to wrap this up. Who's under more pressure? The offensive line and the running backs to keep the running game trending in the right direction, or the perimeter playmakers to step up and make plays for Arch in the passing game?
Yeah, I'm looking at those wide receivers. And I say that because, look, for Ryan Wingo, DeAndre Moore, and Parker Livingstone, those are your three that you have right now. Someone's got to show that they can be this number one. We believe it to be Ryan Wingo, having rewatched the tape several times. Arch's first look a number of times that either he didn't go to Ryan Wingo, but the intent was there. The play design was for Ryan Wingo. We've heard Sark talk about it. The steps he's been taking this offseason to become that number one guy. It all points to Ryan Wingo. But we didn't see that. We didn't see the connection. We didn't see the separation. We didn't see Arch breaking from read 1 to read 2 to give those guys time. So I'm looking at those wide receivers the same way I'm looking at Arch Manning, saying, hey, y'all are hand in hand right now. If y'all are looking to bounce back as a unit, y'all need to depend on one another, because ultimately 166 yards on the ground with 4.5 per carry against Ohio State. I think those offensive linemen came into Monday thinking, okay, we're kind of grooving right now. And they're looking at San Jose State having just allowed 250 yards to Central Michigan, saying, and we're about to feast on Saturday this upcoming weekend.
Yeah, I'm with you regarding the passing game, because I hope by the time that the clock hits 0 at the end of that Sam Houston game and Texas flips the switch and gets ready for SEC play, that we're looking at the Ohio State game in terms of how the passing game functions as the exception, not the rule. And hopefully the sample size will say, yeah, they're going to be fine when they get to SEC play based on what we've seen since the Ohio State game. I will say, though, CJ, I don't want to get to the end of these 3 games and the inverse is true for the run game, thinking, man, remember when they ran the ball in Ohio State? That seemed like it was forever ago. I just don't want the run game to take a step back. Yes, they left some meat on the bone, and there's room to improve. I just want them to keep trending in that direction. Don't take a step back with the ground attack.
Yeah, and it's going to be a bit misleading, too, because if Texas gets under center and they run, a 3rd and 1 or a 4th and 1 and they easily power through, and I think easy, reaction to that is they figured out what was wrong originally with the QB sneak in this short yardage. Well, let's keep in mind, San Jose State not necessarily packing the burliest boys on the plane from the West Coast to come out here to Austin, right? No one over 295 pounds on that defensive line. So, yes, technique-wise, Texas might be tidying up some things, but the result isn't going to be indicative of what we see in SEC play unless Texas is just absolutely mopping the floor and Michael Oring some of these guys from the blind side into Bevo's cage by the end of this game.
All right, let's tell you about our friends over at Advanced Pain Care. They are our sponsor for this edition of On Texas Football. Let's do so with the help of a couple of lifetime Longhorns.
Pros know the pain stops here.
Physical therapy helps me as an athlete then and now. And do I still need therapy? Yes. And Advanced Pain Care helps with that.
Injuries will stack up. They'll add up. You can't let those injuries get you down, and Advanced Pain Care has been very helpful for me.
We can help with whatever's got you down, from nerve damage to our spinal cord stimulator. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Same-day appointments available.
Advanced Pain Care. The pain stops here.
All right, CJ, let's take a look at the defense to wrap this up. Who's under more pressure, that defensive front to create more pressure on the quarterback, or is it the guys on the back end to create more havoc plays, make plays on the ball in the air?
Yeah, it's tough having watched that Ohio State game over and over. Ohio State, quite frankly, didn't put the ball in harm's way, and they didn't give Texas many opportunities to make plays on the football, right? They limited the verticality of their offensive and passing attack. So, I think those chances will come, and they just weren't there for the defensive secondary on Saturday a week ago. So I'm looking at that pass rush because, again, we've talked about it. Ohio State could have a very good offensive line when this is all said and done. Just like Texas, it was a newer unit, and yet there was still pressure that found ways to get home from Ohio State. For Colin Simmons, for Ethan Burke, we didn't see much Brad Spence, but for Anthony Hill specifically, it's time to make it known that y'all are All-Americans. It's time to make it known that your fingers are going to be on the scale and tilting it towards your favor week in and week out. We ultimately didn't see that enough last weekend, and these next 3 games should be I'm calling them statistic games, Jeff. It should be opportunities for those guys to really bolster those end of season statistics with sacks, forced pressures, forced fumbles perhaps. They need to get it done this weekend.
I lean more to the turnovers only because of this aspect. San Jose State running that run and shoot offense, it could be a game where maybe they're just lining up with the shotgun, trying to get the ball out as quickly as possible to negate the Texas pass rush. Yep. So Sark made a great point this week. CJ made it a couple of times, but on the Thursday Zoom call with the media, his pregame Zoom, and said, look, and Pro Football Focus only had Texas down for 2 missed tackles against Ohio State. Now, I don't know if it was 2, CJ, but going back and watching the game, it wasn't very many. It's very much in the low single digits, but rallying to the football, Sark liked the effort. Now it's about, hey, the first guy gets there and wraps up. Now the second guy's got to get there. You got to start punching at the ball. Every hat that gets there subsequently has got to start trying to rip the ball out and create turnovers. Again, Texas had a 24-game streak with a turnover force that was snapped against Ohio State. The last time Texas did not force a turnover in a game was that 2023 loss to Oklahoma in the Red River game. No turnovers forced by the Longhorns on that day. Hopefully they get some breaks go their way, and they've got to force some of that too. CJ, any final thoughts before Texas goes on this 3-game stretch, which I wrote it over on ontexasfootball.com on Friday morning? Sark talked about really internal focus being the key, it is of the utmost importance. We're not really talking about scheme with the opponent or personnel with the opponent. The next 3 weeks are about Texas getting better and Texas taking care of Texas.
Yeah, a large part of that will be the depth and how much Texas is able to manufacture and get quality snaps for over the next 3 weeks. And we're going to see a lot of new faces, whether it be true freshmen, whether it be guys that transferred in. So, Jeff, I'm going to put you on the spot here. I'm going to give you an either or here, but pick a side of the ball that you're most excited to see some of these newcomers. Is it offense? Is it defense? And who are some of those guys that, folks should be really excited to see get on the field for the first time as a Longhorn?
Yeah, I'll say, obviously the focus has been on the offense, but I'll say the defense just because I think there's a really good chance we could see those interior defensive linemen. Throw Justice Terry into that mix, Josiah Sharma, maybe see Myron Charles. In the secondary, probably see Cade Phillips. Good chance we see Jonah Williams over the next 3 games. Even a guy like Bo Barnes at linebacker. See some more Ty Anthony Smith. Just so many more Lance Jackson. Lance Jackson played against Ohio State, but let's see more of it. So many young, talented guys on this defense. And it's funny, you go back to Sark's first year, and the defense was absolutely abysmal. And our colleague Rod Babers told me a long time ago, hey, you can mask some of your deficiencies on offense with scheme. If you don't have players on defense, at some point you are going to get exposed. Well, CJ, we know Texas has the pieces to continuously, under Pete Kwiatkowski, have one of the best defenses in the country. And these 3 games are a really big part of not just establishing confidence, but guys getting their feet wet, getting used to the speed of the game. So by SEC play, when you need to call on somebody, at least they've had some in-game experience, getting dirty a little bit. And again, I know the cool front's supposed to come in still. An 11 a.m. kick in that stadium, it's going to be hot. It's going to be nasty. You're going to need to use your depth. So Sark talked about playing upwards of 30 guys on defense against Ohio State. They didn't get to that point.
Not even close.
They'll go into, hey, if there's a scholarship body available for this game on defense for Texas, he's probably going to get at least a couple of snaps. So, Yes, get the depth some work. I'm anxious to see some of those guys on defense out there.
I like that.
All right, CJ, thank you for the knowledge and expertise as always. Thank you to Matthew behind the scenes for producing it. Thank you to the entire On Texas Football staff. If you're not a member over at ontexasfootball.com, get over to the site right now. Sign up using the promo code OTFOG, and that'll get you 1 year of access for $39.95. Make sure you like this video and that you're subscribed to the On Texas Football YouTube channel. That way, whether it's here on the channel or over on the site, you're not missing anything before, during, and after every Texas football game this season. For CJ, for Matthew, for the entire On Texas Football staff, and our friends at Advanced Pain Care, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And until next time, welcome.